Hello, everybody. I'm Angie Stead from Genius School, and I'm really happy to be here with Karen and Stacey. I'll just share my screen, so bear with me a second, folks, and we'll do some intros as well. We're talking today about social and emotional well-being in this digital age. It's something that pops up all the time for Karen and myself, both in our own professional capacity and also in the capacity of Genius School as well. I'm Angie Stead. I'm the co-founder and leader of Genius School, and I'm here with Karen Bonanno, who is one of our leaders, our founding members, and she leads our Young Entrepreneur Academy, which is running as we speak, actually, over the next few weeks. So we have an amazing guest here, Stacey, who we'll introduce in a second, who's going to be talking to us about factors that can shape mental health of young people. Why it's really important to support the mental health of our young ones. Well, everybody, but we're thinking about students and young people in general, and techniques to enhance emotional resilience and develop the social and emotional well-being, which is very closely linked to social competence as well. And we'll be looking at Genius School's opportunities to upskill the next generation, taking into consideration everything we talk about today. So, who is Genius School? Well, Genius School offers child-centered, personalized learning pathways for every student. And because we personalize the learning, we're incorporating the social and emotional intelligence and self-awareness of all of our students. And in doing so, we ignite their natural genius, their talents and their strengths. We're creating more self-awareness, which is linked to motivation for learning. So as lifelong learners, it's really important that we tap into that intrinsic motivation, which is empowering our future change makers and leaders, because they're the ones that are going to, take the planet forwards and nurture our future generations. And as we say in Genius School, we're learning, we're discerning, and we're learning together on a purposeful pathway. But before we step into the great content and meet our new speaker, I want to talk about the meaning of the word genius. And that's because we often get questions about this. Well, people will say, I'm not a genius, or I am a genius, and that puts me above everybody else. But in the context of Genius School, the meaning of the word genius is based on the ancient meaning. The ancient Romans believed that it was our unique spirit or personality that resides in our body for the whole of our lives. So it's derived from two Latin terms, genius meaning as above, and ingenium, a related noun, referring to our innate dispositions, who we are born to be, our talents and our inborn nature. So in doing so, we are blending the concepts of the divine and the talented. And if you look at this meaning, then we can see why everybody truly is a genius. So Karen, I'd like to hand over to you to introduce the topic of our conversation today.
Great, thank you, Angie, and welcome everybody to this particular broadcast that we're having today. The whole aspect of mental health and young people is global. The focus I've put here is really on the US information, but even before the pandemic, mental health in young people was starting to raise a lot of concerns and issues, particularly for myself as an educator working with teens. And then, of course, the pandemic came, and then it's now post, and we're still seeing a lot of issues around mental health and young people. And these are some factors that are identified by the US Surgeon General. And they're important for us to see because it's not just one thing, it's kind of multiple things that impact everybody's mental health, not just young people, but we're focusing on them for this particular broadcast. So there's all sorts of things that can help people to support them, but there's also some of those things impact on how their mental health is and their state of being. So we've got things like right back to the basics of the individual themselves, and then we go into the family, so their relationships that they have with their immediate family and their siblings and their caregivers and other people, but then out into the community, and that can have a big impact. But if we have a nurturing community, a community that kind of considers that we are a village raising the child, then that's positive. But if it's a community that is not feeling safe, if it's a community where we're seeing youth crime, that they're all things that impact on people's mental health. And then there's the environment as well. And then ultimately society and what's happening in the wider world. So if we're thinking about how much technology young people have, how much screen time they have, all that begins to impact, because I don't know about you, but when I turn on media, it seems to be the bad news stories that I hear most of the time, not the good news stories. So, someone said to me, it's the bad news that sells, not the good news. But it'd be really nice to have this balance. And so what we have to do is think about, well, where can we create environments where we have the good news, and how can we bring young people into that space? So they're kind of the overarching factors that we need to consider. Then if I go to the next slide, Angie, this actually is identified as key takeaways by the US General Surgeon. And it says that mental health is shaped by a combination of factors. So that refers to the previous graphic that we saw. So it's not just us in a physical state of being, it's a whole lot of other things as well can shape our mental health. And then another key takeaway is that, got trigger happy there, Angie. Another key takeaway is that we need to focus on youth mental health now. It would be remiss of us to not focus on that now, because it will only begin to accelerate. And as I've looked at statistics, I come from Australia, if you haven't managed to pick up the accent there. In Australia, we have a group called Mission Australia, and they do an annual youth survey every year. And as I look at that, I see that the concern that young people have about their mental health increases all the time. They have other things that they're concerned about, but mental health is a key factor. Now, if we go to the next slide, we've got two other key takeaways here. So mental health is an essential part of overall health. So if our mental health is in a positive state, then it does mean that our kind of physical health is probably pretty good as well. But if we've got either one of those out of balance, they tend to trigger off each other. So it's essential that we think about mental health as an overall health status. And then, of course, unfortunately, we've still got to go back to the COVID because we're still feeling the after effects of that. And it says here, since the pandemic, rates of psychological distress among young people has increased. So it's us being mindful, it's us accepting that we have a responsibility, whether it's as a parent bringing up teen, whether it's someone like myself who's in education, my interaction with teens and building their trust and the relationships that I have. And then, of course, our amazing guest speaker for us today, Dr. Stacey, Stacey, you've kind of got a real grab bag of all of those all together as a parent, as an educator, and as a school psychologist. So, Andy, I'll getting my names mixed up. Angie, I'll hand back to you. Okay. You can give that wonderful reference to the quote and introduce Stacey.
Thank you, Karen. So this is an amazing quote by Dr. Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General of the US. And it is, if we seize this moment, step up for our children and their families in their moment of need, and lead with inclusion, kindness, and respect, we can lay the foundation for a healthier, more resilient, and more fulfilled nation. And I think that's just the perfect quote to begin to then introduce Dr. Stacey Herrera, who's both a school psychologist and a Genius School educator as well. So Stacey, a huge welcome from us at Genius School.
Thank you so much. No, this is such an important topic, and I appreciate you using the research that has been done here in the US, but we know that statistically speaking, this is a global issue and something that we need to look at within all of our younger generation. Yeah. So I am going to pull up my screen here. So if you all can give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen. So again, looking at nurturing social and emotional well-being in this digital age. It's really important that we not only look at how students are currently handling or managing their mental health and stressors, but also what can we do to support them in this current digital age. So social media use by youth is nearly universal. Up to 95% of youth ages 13 to 17 report using a social media platform, with more than a third saying they use social media almost constantly. And although age 13 is commonly the required minimum age used by social media platforms, at least in the US, nearly 40% of children ages 8 to 12 are using social media. So nearly 70% of parents say parenting is now more difficult than ever, or than it was even 20 years ago, with technology and social media as the top two cited reasons. So looking at this balance of social emotional well-being, and also how do we support that within this digital age is really important. So we want to remember that using technology to connect, create, collaborate is really valuable. When we find that ourselves and our children are using it to disconnect, distract, differentiate, or destroy, it's time to find another way of using our time. So we do know that for whatever reason, dogs seem to engage people and encourage them to pay attention. So here's a little dog slide for you. Sometimes our technology feels like it's trying to get our attention in the same way that this dog is. And sometimes our technology will feel as if it is a place of respite or relief when we're feeling uncomfortable. But really, it's important to pay attention to how we're using technology. So there are negative side effects to technology in general. Social media is not inherently good or bad. The effects of social media use often depend upon the teen's strengths and weaknesses, their online privileges, and environment in which they're growing up. Evidence suggests that if vulnerable youth are exposed to maladaptive behavior, such as cutting or other coping mechanisms that are maladaptive, they may be more likely to participate in that kind of behavior. It goes back to the brain development, right? We were looking at this particular slide, and they're just undergoing such a highly sensitive period of brain development and growth. We equate the teenage years almost to those of infancy, in which there's such a rapid amount of growth. And so it's really important to pay attention to what they're consuming and how they're consuming that. So sometimes we just have to check in and see how you're feeling. There are some positive pieces, right? There was a longitudinal cohort study of US adolescents aged 12 to 15 that adjusted for baseline mental health status and found that adolescents who spent more than 3 hours per day on social media face double the risk of experiencing poor mental health outcomes, including symptoms of depression and anxiety. So how do we combat that with these positive pieces, right? The adequate sleep, adequate physical activity and exercise, allowing them to have some critical thinking supports in place to decide whether or not this particular social media platform or the information that they're gaining from technology is useful to them. Providing them with a certain level of self-awareness or encouraging their self-awareness for them to understand when too much is too much, and when to really set limits around how they're using technology. Really encouraging digital literacy, because these are things that we did not have growing up as parents. It's really important that as a family, we're looking at how to use technology, including social media, and ensure that we're using it safely. And communication is key. We may say that, oh, that's just how teens communicate these days. They have to be on the social media apps. They have to have a phone at a certain age, or they're being left out. It's really important for each family to decide what is the level of maturity of their children and when is it appropriate for them to be using these devices, as opposed to when is it more appropriate for them to be learning how to communicate in person. Again, making sure that they have the skills in person prior to attempting them digitally. So here's just some practical tips for navigating technology use. We want to define age-appropriate use based on the maturity level of the adolescent or teen. So we're not here to say that your 10-year-old is not capable of being on social media, or that your 15-year-old isn't mature enough to be on social media. It really is a conversation around the maturity level of each individual. We want parents and caregivers and educators to be modeling appropriate technology and social media use. If I, as a parent, am constantly on Facebook and looking at my phone, then it would be understandable that my child then is going to model that behavior and resist the idea of not being on social media when they're seeing us as adults on it all the time. We want to build in those resiliency and social emotional skills in person before exposing them online. It's really important that we have those baseline social skills. And for some, the pandemic time really put them at a disadvantage because they didn't have those natural interactions to build those social skills. Now, we also know that social media and the use of technology is really beneficial for those who are socially isolated and or a member of a marginalized group. It provides them with that solace, with that understanding that they may not be able to gain from their in-person interactions. We want to encourage youth to be educated on the data and information that's being collected by social media platforms. We want to discuss limits and boundaries and be open to coaching, not only from your children, like this is how things work, but also from others, right? This is how you can encourage your own children to modify how often they are online. We want to monitor and hold active discussions with youth about the content and the platforms that they're using. This is an ongoing discussion, mostly because technology is advancing so quickly. Who would have thought a year ago we would have had conversations about the use of ChatGPT when writing your essay for class? And now we do have to have those conversations and understanding when it's appropriate to have ChatGPT help with an outline and when it's inappropriate to have ChatGPT write the entire essay. So again, just constant conversations and open communication is essential for navigating this time. A small randomized control trial in college-age youth found that limiting social media use to 30 minutes daily over 3 weeks led to significant improvements in depression severity. This effect was particularly large for those with high baseline levels of depression, who saw an improvement in depression scores by more than 35%. There was another randomized trial among young adults, and adults found that deactivation of social media platforms for 4 weeks improved their subjective well-being. And subjective well-being is a fancy scientific way of saying happiness. So we understand that taking breaks and knowing your limits is really important to overall health and well-being. And sometimes it's just a matter of taking that digital break. Sometimes we just need a little respite so that people can listen to what we have to say. Social media use should not restrict opportunities to practice in-person reciprocal social interactions and should not contribute to psychological avoidance of in-person social interactions. And what we're finding more and more is that students during the pandemic became very accustomed to being isolated and solely communicating through technology, and that there's some almost social anxiety around re-engaging and getting back into in-person environments where they will have to initiate conversations, hold reciprocal conversations, and where they're unsure of how people will respond because they have been in more of this digital world for so long. So there are specific indicators of problematic social media or technology use. Again, a tendency to use social media even when adolescents want to stop or realize that it's interfering with necessary tasks, spending excessive effort to ensure continuous access to social media. There's strong cravings to use the social media or disruptions in other activities caused by missing social media use too much. Repeatedly spending more time on social media than intended, and lying or deceptive behavior to retain access to social media use. And knowing that loss or disruption of significant relationships or educational opportunities have occurred because of that social media use. So in addition to the U.S. Surgeon General, the American Psychological Association has put out this health advisory on social media use in adolescents, recognizing that it's a very large problem and that multiple different disciplines as well as stakeholders need to invest time into supporting youth during this time. We know that social connection is the most reliable predictor of a long, healthy, and satisfying life. Without technology, I wouldn't be able to talk with Karen and Angie. I haven't seen them in person since 2019, and it feels like a very long time. So technology in this way is really helpful for maintaining social connections. And yet, we need to ensure that we're reducing mental health symptoms while doing that. So again, the boosting mood benefits of being in person, it reduces stress and can improve self-esteem. And these same preventative strategies that promote mental health, like helping students feel connected, help prevent a range of negative experiences like drug use and violence. So again, using technology, using social media to connect is going to improve our mental health. We can, again, reduce more mental health symptoms by building strong bonds and relationships with adults and friends at school, at home, and in the community. We want to increase this feeling of connectedness because of the importance of protective factors for adolescents. And we want to reduce those risky behaviors, that drug use and violence. So youth need to know someone cares about them. Connections can be made virtually or in person, but they need to know and feel seen, heard, and valued. So according to the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory, to better safeguard the mental health and well-being of children and adolescents, policymakers, technology companies, researchers, families, and young people must all engage in a proactive and multifaceted approach. So here are some really quick, practical strategies. Create a family media plan. There are several online sources where you can create contracts or have a family contract of how often the family is going to be using media, in which designated areas, at what times of day is it acceptable and not acceptable. And if the plan is created as a family, then the teens are less apt to feel as though they are being targeted or restricted in some way from connecting with their friends, which is often the reason that they want to have access to technology late at night. We want to encourage everyone to curate your feed. We know that these platforms have algorithms, and if your feed on social media or on several different platforms is something that's unsettling or uncomfortable to you, we need to change what we're liking on our platforms in order to really create a feed of information that's coming to us that is feeding and fueling us and not necessarily provoking fear or discomfort. We want to schedule a technology-free day each week and have those tech-free zones. We want to reduce the app notifications and set limits. The iPhone has a beautiful way of saying, hey, how often do you want to be on this app? And the app, then it will come up and say, you've been on the app for this period of time. Do you want to shut it off? Do you want to continue? It gives you a lot of freedom, but I think it allows individuals to see really how long have you been on this particular social media app. And so I know for myself, when I set it to 1 hour on Facebook, and when it says I have 5 minutes left, I'm always a bit shocked that I've been on it for 55 minutes. But time goes quickly when you're scrolling. So it's really important to use technology in your favor, knowing that it can help really to set those limits. We want to monitor technology time versus real life activities. It's really important for full brain development and mental health that individuals have exposure to a variety of activities and a variety of different strategies to manage life's ups and downs. We want to use social media to connect and to encourage people to connect around their areas of interest or being associated with a particular group and knowing that they are global members to that particular group. We want to encourage everyone to report any cyberbullying or any type of misuse. It's important, especially for teens, to understand what that looks like so they can report it quickly, because left unreported, then of course they are put in a vulnerable position. Here are some resources, knowing that we have a lot of information out there, but this is the latest and greatest with regards to looking at social media use and technology use and mental health for adolescents. So that's what I have to share today. I know it was a lot of information all at once, but hopefully you were able to get some clear strategies out of it. And it's really important to just continue the conversation, continue to ask questions. And the more you can open up that conversation with your child or adolescent around their use of social media or technology in general, the easier it will be for you as a family to navigate the ever-changing world of technology.
That is so cool, Stacey. Some real great wisdom there. Thank you for sharing. A few takeaways for me as well. You know, it's understanding, growing your self-awareness and understanding your own patterns of behavior is really important, isn't it? When you're trying to understand where the hooks might be and how you might get drawn into the social media platforms. And so, as Karen said here, you know, for anybody on the call, what have been your key takeaways? And if anybody has, we've probably got, with your permission, Stacey, just a few minutes. If anybody does have any questions for Stacey, then please do post your questions in chat. We're happy to answer them. And if not, be interested to know your key takeaways, as Karen says. But I loved how you said, Stacey, that having the zones as well, like tech-free zones. I thought, well, you know, we're a household full of adults here, but I think that's really helpful for us too, because it's a really good strategy to limit time. Karen, do you have any comments?
Well, yeah, that was really great, Stacey. I like the practical tips and the strategies. You know, a couple that popped out at me is the modeling the appropriate behavior, so that young people who are around you, regardless of whether they're your own kids or whether they're friends of family and all that sort of thing, it's modeling that appropriate behavior. I know in one family I go to, the one rule they have in their household is no mobile phones at the table, not even turned upside down. So they basically have it that you have to put the phone in a basket away from the table. So that means then they sit down for a meal and they have the conversations. So I think that's a rich experience. And the other thing too is all that alignment I'm seeing with the reference to practical strategies about having that balance between the screen time, but also the real life activities. But there is the opportunity, and Genius School, we focus on this, is allowing students to research and explore and discover themselves and other things around them through real world learning. So they're able to look at the development of their projects or other activities. And that means they're using technology for a constructive opportunity, not just entertainment or something like that. So I think it's really a case of seeing the value for, you know, what is available for young people and having that real life, but also the opportunity then to engage in that digital literacy and knowledge development, but then for them to have the opportunity to communicate that. So the technology used for a positive, beneficial growth outcome rather than just that kind of crutch that they want to hang on to as something that they feel that they need to have for that fear of missing out. I have to be using technology, otherwise I'll have that fear of missing out. So really great tips and strategies. And then for us, I think, is to do that mix of how do we see that all aligning so that we can then take it out and implement it within our own environment, community, family interactions, and so forth.
Thanks, Karen. And that's great that Stacey's also included multiple strategies as well as a variety of resources, because every education setting is different, every family dynamic is different. So, you know, talking about personalizing experiences, I think really great tip you gave there, Stacey, was involving the student, involving the child in that whole conversation so that you get that buy-in, and, you know, there's less resistance to whatever you
Agreed.
agree together.
Agreed. Yes, I apologize for the power surge that knocked me off there, but in therapeutic settings, there have often been times where technology has come up, right? That parents are concerned with the amount of use. The student doesn't really understand because all of their friends are allowed to have unlimited use. And so oftentimes I ask them to start with an audit. So just kind of understanding, well, how often are you on? Like, let's just do a little baseline study and see how often you're on the site or the gaming device or whatever that is, and then come back the next week, and then we'll see what your baseline is, and then we'll have a conversation around, well, what do you think is healthy? And once we give the student, the child, that sense of agency and control over it, they're much more amenable to like shifting their behaviors than if we were to say or mandate that no, you can only be on it for 2 hours.
Yes.
When 2 hours doesn't seem like enough time, especially when gaming, right, to actually get to a certain level or to be able to access all of the friends that they want to on social media. And then the mindlessly scrolling, they lose track of time, and they themselves aren't clear on how much time they're spending.
Yeah, it's so true. And I find that myself, the time just goes like that. So my strategy is to just switch off the notifications and just go on twice a day because I need to for work. So, you know, it's, again, as Karen and yourself say, Stacey, it's about role modeling. So personalizing, coming up with a strategy that involves the student and role modeling, and as well as these slides will go out to everybody who's registered. So so many rich resources there. Thank you, Stacey. And, you know, if you want to rewatch it, then feel free to do that. So a huge thank you, Stacey, for your wisdom and for joining us on this Genius Educator call. Always love to hear you speak and to learn from you as well. So thanks to Dr. Stacey Herrera. And just to come back to Genius School, bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to share my slides. We're personalizing learning, personalizing strategies. Everything gets back to the unique individual. And we believe that if you teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, then we rob them of tomorrow. Technology and social media is a perfect example. This is a quote by John Dewey, but this is very relevant today because, as Stacey said, we face problems today that didn't even exist in my generation. So really great wisdom there and very helpful. Thank you. So for Genius School, we provide whole child education and personalized learning, which is based on self-awareness, knowing my unique strengths and capabilities, and understanding my behavioral patterns, etc., as Stacey was talking about, to then tapping into what do I care about, what matters to me most, and then being able to tap into intrinsic motivation to then express that fully in the world in the form of a career or a business, profession, etc., as we are on that lifelong journey towards self-mastery. But it all starts with the individual. And then if we look at educating for the future, Genius School has pathways and tools that are both free and paid. So we do encourage you to, go have a look at our free tools and our free quizzes. They support with the growing self-awareness of individuals. So that our idea is that we tap into the entrepreneurial spirit. So we teach students how to go and create their own job or create their own business, so they're not relying on others to give them a job. And this is what our Young Entrepreneur Academy is about, which is what Karen is leading at the moment. And we've had some amazing results from that as well. And we also have our Genius Educator program. So we have our Genius Youth Consultant, which is a virtual program where educators learn how to use the free tools and how to have conversations with youth in a way that grows their self-awareness, where they can tap into their genius, and it can set them on a path to success through purpose and project-based learning experiences. And then we have, so this is a micro degree. It's similar to, for any of you who are familiar with the Genius Group, it's similar to the Flow Consultant Program, but it's specifically for teens and young people. So you learn about the Genius School philosophy, you learn how to profile and debrief teens and their families. It's a very different experience to using the profile tools in business. And you learn about the Genius School principles and methodologies and how to use our free quizzes, etc. So if you were to become a youth consultant, then you can generate revenue of up to $10,000 plus. That does depend on you taking action. It's really important I let you know that. But we give you the tools. You get 25 Teen Dynamics tokens and 10 Talent Dynamics tokens. Now, those tokens combined are about 3,500 worth of value. So even if you just sold the tokens, you'd be on top. You'd be, earning more revenue than you would pay. Excuse me. So, and it also includes 12 months mentor status on the Genius U platform and a 12-month license as a Genius School youth consultant. So you can put your own paid content, paid courses, and your own events up on the Genius U platform. And I think the Genius School campus has just under 140,000, just over 140,000 members at the moment, which is really cool. So we are offering that at $1,200. So if anybody is interested in finding out more about it, then please do take action and click the link, which I think Karen is going to put in chat, to book a call with us. If you have any questions around it as well, and any of our Genius School programs or Genius Educator program, then please do book a call. Here's the QR code as well. So you can just scan that code and have a chat with Karen or myself. So that's it from Genius School. I'd like to say again, much thanks to Stacey, our speaker for today, and also to Karen Bonanno, who is one of our leading Genius educators. So thank you for attending. If you've got any questions, book a call and we can answer that for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Stacey. And we'll see you in the not too distant future in person.
Yes. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks heaps.